You're listening to WCOM LP 103.5 FM Carborough and Chapel Hill. It's a Tuesday, it's 5 o'clock, and that only means one thing. It's time for another round of Snarky Faith with your host, Stuart Deloney. This is a space where we irreverently wrestle through life, culture, and spirituality, all with our heads in the clouds, our tongues in our cheeks, our hearts in our sleeves, and our feet on the ground. At Snarky Faith, the questions or even the answers are never the point. It's all about the conversation. So here's your host, Stuart Deloney.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to another round of Snarky Faith Radio. I'm your host, Stuart Deloney. Thank you for joining us again this week. And what we're going to do this week is a little different than our normal rhythms of the show. What I have done here, I have gone back into the Snarky Faith vaults. I've gone so far back into the vaults that I've dug into those areas before we were even Snarky Faith, back when we were called Pub Theology Radio. And I have gone and found for you, my dear listeners, I have found for you some interesting interviews that I did back in the day with some very, very prominent, upcoming, interesting, edifying musicians. Yes, these could have been buried way down on our website, but I wanted them to bring these to you. I wanted to bring these back to you just so you could have a listen of some really interesting dudes that make really interesting music. Now, one caveat I will give you before we launch into these is the fact that when this show was 2 to 3 years younger, on the flip side, I don't know that my skills where they are now. And many of you may be shaking your head because you may be saying your skills right now are not Jedi level. Well, we were way back in the Padawan stages during that time. So what I'm going to do here is bring to you 2 interviews, one with singer-songwriter Andrew Belle, who is an up-and-comer. Andrew makes just gloriously beautiful music, and on top of it, he's just a really chill, cool dude. And after that, I'm going to launch into my conversation that I had with singer-songwriter, also kind of like, international star, Ben Lee. Ben Lee was a huge phenom back in the 90s in Australia, and his music there launched over across the pond. I don't know if you can say across the pond when you're talking from Australia to the US, but maybe across the lake, because across the pond is usually left for between the US and Britain, if you get this. So, sorry, my metaphor broke down right in front of my face. It was disgusting. It was ugly. But thank you for hanging with me through that. So, yes, Ben Lee, who is an actor, a singer, a songwriter, but he's also an advocate for Ayahuasca and its spiritual awakening that it offers in the midst of it. So it is a very interesting conversation. Hang tight. We have Andrew Belle, we have Ben Lee, and here we go. Today on Pub Theology, I've got the pleasure of talking with singer-songwriter Andrew Belle. His sophomore album, Black Bear, came out in August, and he's currently on tour. This Saturday, November 16th, at Local 506 in Chapel Hill, he's going to be playing. And it is my pleasure to be talking with him. So, Andrew, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, we just like you said, we just started the final leg of this tour. We've been kind of doing it in chunks since May, and so we've got one more, and we're all feeling good. The band's reunited, and we're excited to be out with leagues right now.
So when you're traveling, I mean, you said you started back in May. Have you guys, is this cross country or where's this taken you roughly?
Yeah, well, so we've broken it up so that nobody goes crazy. I've done tours in the past that, span over many months, and I've found, at least for myself, I get burned out really easily doing that. So we started back in May. We decided to kind of tackle things in chunks. And so the band is based in Nashville. My wife and I live in Chicago, and so what we do is we all kind of meet up in Nashville a few days before the tour. We rehearse, and then, like the first run we did was kind of in the Midwest. second run in July was on the East Coast, and August was on the West Coast, and September and October were kind of more in the middle again, and now we're wrapping things up on the East Coast again. So we're just kind of taking it, in legs, that everybody gets to go home and see their family and feel like they have a little bit of a normal life.
So when does the tour wrap up?
We wrap up just before Thanksgiving in Atlanta, and then I think we're going to take some time off for the holidays before starting up again next year.
Oh, nice. It's good to kind of. I'm glad I'm hearing you pace yourself, because I feel like when I talk to some people, when they go on tour, it is a ground pounding kind of grind it out, just get it done.
Yeah.
Kind of a pace. So it sounds good that you figured out a way to stay sane in the process.
Yeah, there's sort of two schools of thought. Like I said, I have experience with just knocking it all out at once, which is, there's a benefit to that. But I've just found, at least in this experience, for the last 6 months, I feel really refreshed every time we start up again, which has been really, really helpful for my own just mentality. Traveling and playing music and stuff, it's a blessing to be able to do that, but it really takes a toll on you if you ever have been on an extended trip for a couple weeks or something. You know that at the end of a week or two, you're ready to get back home to your own bed and your family and all that. So it's the same thing with this. So yeah.
So you were, let's talk a little about your past, like where you've come from. So you're born and raised in Chicago, and still living there, from what I'm hearing. Yeah. So what was your early years like? And talk about the process or your journey. Like, how did music start to take hold in your life?
Well, it's sort of funny. I didn't really grow up very interested in music as a kid. Or my sisters were actually the ones who sort of were taking piano lessons and singing and recitals and all those things. I was more interested in sports, basketball and football and all that stuff. And it wasn't really until high school that my buddies and I just kind of picked up acoustic guitar just kind of on a whim, and we started teaching ourselves how to play. And that was what, so it was sort of later in the game. I was probably a sophomore, junior in high school before I played in my first band. Like everybody who gets into music at a young age, they're just sort of a garage band, playing a lot of covers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just kind of a guy in the background who just liked being in a band, and I just kind of played bass guitar and just kind of, I didn't sing at all or write music at all. I just kind of showed up and was along for the ride. And it wasn't really until college that I started really getting into, my musical horizons were broadening. My awareness of bands and artists and songwriters was sort of being revolutionized, as most people discover when they go to college. You meet a whole bunch of new people, and everybody's got new music that they're into, and all of a sudden I was hearing music that I was really inspired by, and I thought I would. I was always sort of a good writer growing up. I couldn't sing to save my life, but I liked writing a lot, and something about the songwriting process kind of spoke to me. And some midway through college, I started songwriting, and that just sort of really opened up my love for music. It kind of took it to the next level, and I realized that it was something I'd like to maybe do professionally. So I just kind of kept writing and teaching myself how to write by listening to my favorite bands and my favorite artists. It's kind of something that you just sort of have to teach yourself, I found. And so, over the years, I graduated school, and I decided to give music a chance after college. Started waiting tables back in Chicago, and started playing around at a lot of bars and restaurants, kind of doing the singer-songwriter thing. And eventually I moved down to Nashville, and I kind of just coincidentally met some people who were songwriters down there, and I went down for a visit and really enjoyed it. Was kind of plugged into a community down there pretty quickly, and before I knew it, I was living there and touring, and I put up my first record in 2010, and I've just been touring and building on that ever since.
Mm. Now with Black Bear, you're getting some good traction. You're getting a lot of good reviews on this album. I know, like the Willamette Week called it sublimely epic. Daily Candy was praising it. They're saying they were smitten by your wistful melodies. Think Chris Martin's pipes, indie electro undertones, and a wholesome pop aesthetic. But I know, isn't it great to hear these things? Yeah. Does it stroke the ego, or you kind of do these things just roll off of you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, every human being, I think, is, obviously we enjoy hearing
Sure.
affirmation of our work and our efforts. And I spent a really long time writing and recording, and I feel really good about the record too. So yeah, it's flattering, and it's awesome to hear that people enjoy it as well. I actually, knowing myself and knowing my nature, I actually try to avoid reading reviews, just even if they're good or bad, just because I know at some point I'm going to read that bad review, and it's going to just, it's going to, I guess I'm just not even allowing myself the possibility to be, bummed out over somebody's subjective opinion about it. And so I kind of just let go of the good and the bad, and I just sort of avoid it altogether.
No, I think that's probably a good process. So at least to keep sane. Yeah. Yeah, but with Blackberry, like this album's, I mean, I guess you could say it's a bit of a change in direction for you, or at least a change in the overall sound. I don't know if you'd actually say like a reinventing process, but it's somewhere close to that. Can you describe kind of the process of the change that's going on? Like, speak into, how you've evolved on this album.
Absolutely. I wrote my last record, my first record, The Ladder, in 2008, and I wrote this record in 2012. And so, that's 4 years of musical growth and progression and taste evolving. If you think about, I often compare it to, when you go off to college, and, if you think about what you're listening to when you finish high school and what you're listening to when you graduate college, it's drastically different most times. There's a lot of maturity that happens, and your musical taste changes drastically. And I feel like that's what happened to me as well. I wrote sort of a folky pop singer-songwriter record in 2008 because that's what I was listening to, and that's what I was, into. I was listening to Greg Laswell and Ingrid Michaelson and Katie Herzig and all these sort of like quirky pop singer-songwriters. And then over the years, I started to get a little bit more into more of the left of center, alternative, ambient electronic stuff. I discovered Radiohead at a really late age, and obviously it's sad, but it's kind of cliche to reference Radiohead, at this point. But that's a band that really kind of broadened my musical, I guess, the way I look at, interpret, and go about songwriting. And so for that reason, I wanted to make a record that demonstrated what I'm into. I want to make a record that I'd be excited to listen to. That was sort of the goal and the rule of thumb all along. And so basically, instead of writing every song like I used to on my acoustic guitar or a piano, I bought some recording equipment and some synthesizers, and I just sort of, for the first time, I just sat down and I spent hours and hours and hours just building soundscapes, on my computer, and using different keyboards and synthesizers. And I created fully fledged demos in my apartment last summer, and something I'd never done before. And I really wanted to go for something ambitious and ambient, and yet at the same time, the songwriting from like a melodic or a lyrical standpoint, I kept that approach is exactly the same, as I've always approached songwriting, with a heavy emphasis on lyrical weight and just melodic, interesting melodies in terms of, I don't know. Those are the two things that I always gravitate towards. Is I want to write lyrics that are clever and meaningful, and I want to write melodies that sort of stir up emotion and are interesting. So I kept that approach the same, but it's just sort of presented in a different package.
Well, with this, like when thinking of this record, just in certain terms, I know you were interviewed recently by I think it was Noise Trade, and you were talking about the record, and you said this is the most consistent and overarching theme that's found in your album is that of a God that pursues a man until he inevitably succumbs to his presence. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I guess there's some Calvinist theology layered into that. That's even hard to, nuance verbally, but I'll try. Yeah, I mean, I became a Christian a couple of years ago. I grew up, I should preface that by saying I grew up as a Christian. I grew up in Christian schools, but it really wasn't something that took over my whole life. It didn't become the most important thing to me until only a few years ago. And that really changed my whole life. And not just musically, but personally in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, going through a lot of personal stuff at the time and sort of discovering my faith, I couldn't help but let that influence my writing. When something is as big and as important as that topic, it's when you're going to sit down and write a record that's meaningful, I can't think of much else that would be worthy of writing about. And so when I sat down to write about this record, there's a few themes. I got married last year, so that obviously was like something I wrote about, my marriage and my relationship with my wife. Stuff going on with my family was another one. And then, like I specified, though, I think the most overarching theme was just my relationship with God and how I felt like He really kind of pursued me at a very specific time, and sort of the struggle and the wrestling that kind of came forth in the wake of all that. And so, yeah, it's a very personal record that sort of speaks about my faith and my story. And that's kind of what I've always written my songs about. I don't really write a lot of songs, but when I do, I like to make them really personal and sort of autobiographical in nature.
So what is some of this stuff? Because I know, like, I was I think it was at a press release, you'd said that Black Bear is an album that conceptually reflects and touches on all the most important relationships in your life. And it's a dialogue and a wrestling with God. I mean, what do you feel like that you are wrestling with right now, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I wrote that and when I wrote the record, the record reflects the last several years of my life. And so where I am now may not necessarily be wrestling with things that I was wrestling in 2010 or 2011, but it's sort of a look back on that. So it's not exactly completely current, but I don't know, man. Like when you dealing with Christianity and faith and the faith that takes to believe in a God that created everything around us and created you and me, and if you believe in Christian theology and salvation and all this stuff, and it's some really heavy topics. And living in a secular, pluralistic society, you get some pushback on that, and there's some smart people out there who kind of will make you think and question what you believe. And I think it's good to do so, to wrestle with your faith and ask yourself why it is that you believe what you believe. Otherwise, your faith is sort of worthless. And so I went through a lot of that, kind of just, asking myself, well, what about this, and how does this measure up with the gospel, and what about this? And thankfully, I found some good resources. Contemporarily speaking, like Tim Keller, he's a minister in New York City. He was a really great resource for me. And he's sort of a contemporary of C.S. Lewis. Who, I've read some of his work, and those two guys are just philosophically and sort of existentially speaking are just sort of icons for me, and really helped me out a lot in that process. And so the lyrics on this record kind of reflect a lot of that time in my life.
Now, would you say, and I know this is easy and cliched, but so you would probably identify yourself, I think, in terms of being a Christian who happens to be an artist, as opposed to being a Christian artist? Because I know there's a lot of baggage that comes with that.
There really is. I've never felt a specific conviction or a calling to be a Christian artist, on a Christian label, writing worship music and in that circuit. I'm not sure that that's, I know that there's a pressure or a sort of expectation of that. And I guess it's sort of in my nature to fight against that a little bit, because I don't think there's any rules that have to be followed. And I don't think that, I think it's kind of funny that there's a few jobs in our culture that for some reason get tied up in that. Like you would never ask somebody if they were an electrician, if they were a Christian electrician, but for some reason when you're a musician, people are like, well, are you a Christian artist? I mean, yes, I'm a Christian, I'm an artist. I can't help myself but to speak about my faith and do it in an artistic manner when I write my music. But I don't feel particularly led to be branded as that. But I also do recognize that my art is my art allows me a platform to tell my story and ultimately point glory and back to God. So that's my biggest mission. But I don't feel like I need to be on a Christian record label or be on Christian radio or all the other things that come along with that.
No, because I've always found that really interesting too. With because somehow you're right. I think I'm totally with you on this. This perspective that that your faith informs your life, and you're living a life, and you as an artist, you're capturing life that you're experiencing. And I feel like there's oftentimes like this trap, especially with people that become the quote like Christian artists, to where every song is about Jesus being your boyfriend.
Right.
Type of a thing like that too. So it seems like it almost in those niches, you become almost less human, in a certain sense. You know what I mean? It's almost like you don't wrestle, you don't do this. It just needs to be this certain type. Whereas I feel like a lot of what you're speaking about is a lot more honest, and it's a lot more real, and it's a lot more just a good snapshot of what you're walking through.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's definitely some guys out there that I really respect who are in the Christian music world and who I think are doing it really well and honestly. But I've always been really cautious of getting into that world of commercializing Christianity. I think there's something kind of dangerous about that, and so I've just sort of continued to do my own thing, and I haven't really, like I said, I've never felt a particular call into that. So I feel good about where we're at, what we're doing.
Well, no, and I appreciate your honesty on your album as well too, and how you kind of just there's just a natural kind of raw flow to how you're sharing yourself in this, and I think that kind of an I guess intimate songwriting and honest songwriting it can't help but come through in the process.
Yeah, there's a vulnerability that comes along with that, but that's the thing that I've always been attracted to in music, like from day one. I think when I discovered the Counting Crows and I heard Adam Jervis's vulnerability in his voice and in his lyrics, that's what made me want to write music too. And so I don't think I would want to write music if that wasn't a part of it.
Mm-hmm. So speaking about music, what are you listening to these days? Like what is, because you're talking about you're in the tour van and you get to sit back, play on your phone, listen to your music. What is like rocking your world these days musically?
Well, I've been listening to there's this band called Snowden.
Okay, yeah.
That I've been checking out. I'd never discovered them until just they put out a new record that I've really gotten into. Let's see here. But yeah, it's called No One in Control, and I've just been really floored by that record and really given that one a lot of spins. Let's see, what else? I mean, M83 was a big influence on this record. Beach House is something I've been listening to a lot. Bonnie Bear. This band called Tycho. That's sort of like a instrumental band that I've discovered and gotten into lately. Yeah, so those are some of the things that I've been listening to. There's actually a band too called Wild Cup from Nashville that I can't help it. I can't really help. Can you hear me okay? I think I just got sort of far away from the phone.
Yeah, no, we're back.
Yeah, there's a band called Wild Cubs from Nashville that I'm really into their record. It's called the record's called Youth.
Mm. So, looking back, because I know you're talking about like being, this at least leg of the tour is kind of coming to a close in the next week or two. When you're looking back over it, what are your favorite spots, cities, events, moments that have made this tour memorable to you?
Yeah. That's hard to say. You know, you look back and I think we've done, I think by the end of next week we'll have done something like 60 something shows, you know, since May, and they all kind of, sadly to say, they all sort of blur together in my head. But I don't know, I think just putting together this group of guys and traveling the country together is something really special, and something that I think it's sometimes, you know, when you're kind of bored of driving and you're just laying in the van trying to pass the time, you kind of take for granted. But I think looking back, I think one of the most special things is just, you know, having a collection of guys all trying to accomplish the same thing and playing music together every night, which looking back in high school, college, I mean, that was my dream for a long time to do that. So, you know, looking at myself now, you know, 29 years old and doing the very thing that I wanted to do for a living when I was younger, it's easy to forget that, take it for granted. And so I really try to kind of step outside myself sometimes and make sure I appreciate that. You know, the fact that we get to travel and play cities all around the country, and people actually come out, and, you know, a couple hundred at a time, and they see us, and that's just something that is really, really flattering and overwhelming. As far as specific memories, I mean, there's I've gotten to eat at a lot of cool restaurants. I'm a big food guy. I've gotten to eat at quite a lot of, you know, all the restaurants that are kind of on my list to check out. That's something I really, really appreciate and value when we're traveling. And, yeah, I don't know. My band is not necessarily totally into that as much as I am. They're usually okay with grabbing a piece of pizza or something, but I'm usually trying to set out to find, you know, whatever bistro I saw on TV before I left or something. But yeah, I don't know. Those are some of the things that I really value, but I'm not really sure I have any like specific memories.
Sure.
Yeah, actually, kind of. There's one that was pretty funny. We were in Oklahoma City, and we just finished a set, and we knew that we were going to come back on stage and do an encore song, but we, you know, were just kind of saying goodnight, walking off stage. And before I could really even get off stage, this kid jumps up and he's like, "Hey, hold on!" And he's kind of crazy. He's got this crazy look in his eye. And he's kind of belligerent. And he kind of grabs the mic, and I don't know. It was sort of a weird divey club, and it just was kind of like a weird crowd. And so I just was kind of like, you know, immediately on guard, like, what is this guy gonna do? And he grabs the mic and he's like, "I came here with my friend. She really wants to hear this, her favorite song, and so Andrew Belle and the guys are gonna play that song." And I mean, which was really bold because I don't know this guy, and he just kind of announced that we were going to play this song. I'm thinking in my head, like, oh man, it's totally going to be a song that I'm not prepared to play. It's going to be really awkward. And he announces, he's like, "They're going to play The Ladder," which is the title track of my last record, and which just so happened to be the song that we were completely prepared to play.
That's awesome.
And so I looked at him and I told him, first of all, don't ever do that again because you might get punched in the face or something if you jump on stage and freak somebody out. But and then I told him I also thought was really awesome and bold of him. So we'll, you know, sort of satiate his request, and we played the song, and it kind of made it seem like as if, like, you know, we weren't planning on already doing it. It worked out really well, and so that was kind of a neat thing.
That's awesome. So, well, let me on this whole subject of encores, and you can tell me this if this is like me asking a magician how you do a trick. Tell me, you know, I will respect your boundaries on this, but like when I go to concerts over and over again, you know, there's always, it seems to be that expected encore, right? Is that kind of like where people just like, it's just you just wait for it. How do you guys process that? Because you always have the idiots, maybe they're not, or the devoted that are even after the encore. Encore is not good enough. They need a second encore. How do you guys process, like, you know what I mean? Like how much is too much and all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah. That's a tough line to walk, you know, especially I think as you play for more and more people, it's sort of more and more expected that you're going to play an encore. Although I do know some bands that I kind of think need when people just sort of announce ahead of time, like, you know, it's just something that they don't do, and so they're going to play, you know, they'll play an extra song, but they're not going to walk off stage before they play it, you know. I don't know, it's a little bit of a tradition or cultural thing, I guess, but I don't know. We always just plan to have one song. I don't normally like to push the boundaries, because I kind of am a firm believer in ending on a high note.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing worse than coming back out and you play 4 songs, and not to mention that whenever people ask for an encore, I feel like maybe 30% of those people actually want to hear you play another song, and 70% are just kind of there with their girlfriend, and they're like, all right, I'm ready to go home now, And so I'm usually that guy too, so I can totally sympathize with that. So I usually like to just get out, we'll play one song. I'm always extremely grateful if we get the encore, and then we just kind of try to leave on a high note.
That sounds very good and even-headed and level-headed with the whole process too, because I've always wondered. So thank you for sharing this trick of the trade with me, though. So I always like to end an interview with a ridiculously big question, and you can choose to answer this however you like. You can be a smart ass, you can be very deep and introspective. It doesn't really matter.
Okay.
So what season of the year would best reflect your life right now, and why?
What season?
Yeah. If you were to say this season of my life is like blah or whatever.
Yeah. Let's see here. Man. I think right now I'm kind of in, it's hard to not, this might seem like a cop-out, but I completely identify with the season we're in right now, fall transitioning into winter, because I love the fall. It's my absolute favorite season. It's gorgeous. I'd rather have cool, brisk air, than hot, steamy summer. And so, and then on a personal level, I feel like we've been touring a lot this year. We put out a record. It's been sort of an exhausting year, and I'm kind of ready to shut the book on it and kind of hibernate for a little bit. And for that reason, I think exactly where we are at the moment is kind of a perfect reflection of not only where we are, but physically, but also just sort of the season of life that I'm in at the moment.
And what is next for you guys? I know you've got a little more tour, but do you already have next album in your head yet, or is that, what are you processing?
No, definitely not. Like I said, I write pretty. It's hard for me to sort of for me, it's when I'm writing a record, I like to just be home, focusing on the writing and creative process. When we're out promoting and touring and playing shows, it's kind of a separate mindset for me, and so I usually kind of wait till that dies down. So I think this winter I'm going to take some time and maybe start playing around again and see if creative juices are flowing and I come up with anything that I feel good about. But I think we probably won't release anything new. I think this record has a lot of life in it yet. So next year will be sort of all about continuing to promote and play out on the Black Bear record. So I think the next tour we're going to do is going to start up after sometime in the early new year, and I don't know. That's pretty much all we really have planned. I think we're just going to keep touring and just kind of see what opportunities unfold.
Well, awesome. Well, Andrew, thanks for your time today. And for those of you in the area, Andrew Belle is going to be playing at the local 506 here in Chapel Hill this Saturday, November the 16th. Come out, check this out. And if you're not able to do this, if you're listening to us online through podcast, I would definitely go and give Black Bear a listen. It is worth it. I have enjoyed it, and I continue to enjoy it. So, Andrew, thanks so much, and best of luck as you continue the tour. And I look forward. I'll be at the show actually on Saturday night as well too. So I look forward to listen to you live.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, safe travels, man. So I have to give a shout out, much thanks to Andrew Belle. Now, this is kind of a retroactive thank you. We thanked him back then, but I am going to extend that thank you again for being on our show. Thank you, Andrew. And if anyone is interested, you can find his stuff on iTunes. It is very, very, very much worth the listen. And so now we're going to pivot from Andrew Belle to Ben Lee. And a reminder for you guys that are regular listeners, that you can find this episode and past episodes on our website, www.snarkyfaith.com. And also, when you head on over to our website, what you can do, you can sign up for our weekly newsletters. We're not going to spam you once a week emails where once you are signed up, once you are in the Snarky tribe, once you are in the club, what we're going to start doing is offering live shows once a month where we will let you guys call in and be part of it. So it's not simply just me and Dr. Ben talking about a topic. No, no, no. We'll talk about a topic, but you guys will be in the Google Hangout. You will be in the exclusive room where you can ask questions, you can poke holes in us, you can make fun of us. Yes, that is all available to you when you are over on snarkyfaith.com. Now, for our second interview of the day, this is Ben Lee. And Ben started off in the 90s as a singer-songwriter in Australia. His stuff caught on so huge in Australia that it actually catapulted his musical life over to the United States as well. He has done acting, he has done singing, he has done songwriting, all of those good things all mixed together. And on top of it, gosh, he is just a dear human being. I really enjoyed the conversation that I had with him on the show, and I think you guys may find it enlightening. And again, if you're interested in Ben, you can find him on iTunes and all of his whole anthology of music. So without further ado, here is the Ben Lee interview with international artist and musician Ben Lee. So Ben, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
So Ben, music has dominated, it seems like, the landscape of your life. Like you broke into like the Australian music scene in your early teens with Noise Addict, and then continued with a successful solo career that's taken you all over the world. And now you've gone from like indie to mainstream, and now you're like navigating into this new creative territory, kind of like pop icon to like mystic. And looking at your albums like from Awake as a New Sleep to last year's Ayahuasca, Welcome to the Work. Can you talk a little about your spiritual journey and in a certain sense, like how that has paralleled your journey also as a musician?
I suppose the way that they connect is that my creative endeavors and my spiritual exploration have always centered around the same goal. It's always been a common goal, which has been learning about and obtaining the highest possible outcome for any scenario. So, there was a vanity or a pridefulness that led me at certain points to be driven by a search for fame and validation and recognition. But that was the same intensity that I went after that as I have gone after my spiritual inquiries. So it's kind of all been one big journey, which has been about me looking for my own truth. So it's kind of hard for me to separate my spiritual endeavors with my creative ones because they intertwine and go hand in hand in my case. And
because I want to delve a little bit more into your I guess I call it new album, but it's your album from last year, Ayahuasca, Welcome to the Work. Like how would you begin to describe this album in your words?
Well, like all my albums, it's an album that's sprung out of a passion. And, over the last 5 or 6 years, as I've worked intermittently with Ayahuasca, I just felt moved to create a sort of tribute to it because the experiences were so both humbling but empowering and creatively empowering. They opened up a lot of doors, and like most artists, whether it's someone falling in love and wanting to write a song for the object of their affection or whatever the case may be, I was just trying to pay tribute and to capture some of that kind of incomprehensible magic that occurs in these heightened states of consciousness.
Well, for those like that may be listening that don't know much about ayahuasca, can you give us like a short education on it or a little bit of background?
Well, ayahuasca is a medicinal plant. I guess you'd call it a hallucinogenic plant, but it's a healing medicine from Peru and from the jungles of the Amazon. And it's been used for thousands of years. And it's entered Western consciousness kind of gradually over the last 50 or 60 years. One of the first times people heard about it was in a book that William Burroughs and Allen Ginsberg wrote to each other, letters to each other called the Yahe letters, about looking for this medicine in the jungles of the Amazon. But there's been a number of kind of incursions into Western culture. There was a book Daniel Pinchbeck wrote in 2009 or something called 2012, and that talked a lot. So it's something that's been gaining some momentum. I am a lot, quite skeptical of many of the ways that it's discussed. Because for me, first and foremost, I'm a student of spirituality and a devotee of the inner God. And I'm not interested in experiences just for the sake of experiences. And so you see a lot of people tapping into, these neo-psychedelic movements around the world over since the 60s, that it seems like almost distractions from inner work rather than actual inner work. And so I can understand a lot of traditional religion's reluctance to, for people to open up to it, because you see a lot of misuse. But in its purest form, I think the medicine truly is a spirit of the soul that if it's used in the right way, or in a way with a very specific goal, can help one achieve those means.
And so you talk about this, in a certain sense being healing, and I know this has been part of your journey for a lot of your inner work. Can you tell us about some of your experiences with it?
Essentially,
go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, or maybe it'd be easier even to talk about some of the impact that it's had on you.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I guess it's important to talk about ayahuasca within a larger discussion about what are the value of experiencing non-ordinary states of consciousness on the spiritual path. Because whether people use psychedelic medicine, or they meditate, or they use breath and pranayama, or yoga, whatever, there's an attempt to alter the consciousness and to see our lives from a different perspective. And the purpose of that is that those states don't remain. They're peak experiences, that they can provide fuel, and they provide hands-on experience, whereas opposed to just reading about something in a book and reading about Moses and Jesus and the Buddha and Krishna, actually having a first-hand experience. And then, and this is the important thing, if we buckle down and actually take care of business on our spiritual path, which is very unexciting for most of the time, it's that Jack Cornfield thing, after the ecstasy, the laundry. But if we do the laundry and we dedicate our lives to the destruction of the ego and our false selves and deep daily observation and comprehension, those types of peak experiences can offer us a type of motivation and a type of fuel. So for me, that's kind of what they've done, that they took spirituality out of the realm of something to academically study or something that other people, based on other people's experiences, and made it based on my own. When I speak about God, when I speak about the internal reality, when I speak about karma, I speak about them now from experiences of those things, not just as concepts.
No, I think it's extremely important to, in the process of walking all of that out, that it isn't necessarily just all in your head. So, I totally get where you're going at with this. And you had commented, I think once, that, part of your process with walking a lot of your spiritual journey out has been, it has opened you up to questions like, what is life? And what does it mean to be part of a community? And how are you answering those questions these days?
I suppose one of the most disturbing discoveries for me through internal exploration, both whether it's with ayahuasca or just with meditation, and profound reflection on where I am and where we are, is that the New Age maxim of it's all good, it's all love, everything's moving towards enlightenment, I don't believe that anymore. That seems to be what we might call pink spirituality. It's a type of spirituality based on sedating and pacifying our anxieties. Whereas if you look at deep mystical processes, they have to do with an awakening that it's not okay. Kind of like the Matrix, the way Neo wakes up and realizes he's been a prisoner. There's nothing okay about being a prisoner. And without a tremendous fight for his freedom and for the freedom of his mind, he'll remain a prisoner. And that is one of the things that some of the great thinkers, spiritual geniuses like Gurdjieff, tried to draw our attention to, and the Buddha, that we are machines. We're not even human, and we haven't realized we live with an illusion of our freedom, an illusion of our own humanity. And that perhaps has been one of the most disturbing discoveries for me.
And when we're talking about your work, your work always seems to be deeply personal. It seems to be like really honest and transparent. How do you approach music writing?
It changes a lot depending on the process, depending on the particular process that project needs. So say for a project like the Ayahuasca project, me and my collaborator, Jessica Chapney-Khan, we would sit and we'd talk and we'd relax, and then we'd attempt to conjure certain atmospheres through music. It was a much more experimental and abstract process. Whereas I'm working on a project now, which is a kids project that essentially attempts to cover aspects of all 5 of the major religions, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Islam, and Buddhism. And I'm working through that much more systematically with concepts and ideas and a more thorough kind of intellectual approach to it. So I don't think there's one set of rules. It's more that as an artist and as someone on the spiritual path, you build up tools, and you can pull out different tools at different moments when you're confronted with a crossroads.
And when you're dealing with work like this that is deeply personal and spiritual, how do you end up gauging critics and your audience and all that kind of stuff?
I generally have tried to assume that, one of the teachings I received once was that if somebody gives you an insult, it's like a bouquet of flowers. And one of the flowers in there is true. And your job is to sort through it and pull out the true flower and take that and just return the rest or disregard it.
I like that.
And so generally when a critic or a fan or an enemy or whoever it is says something about me that hurts my feelings or injures my pride, I try and realize that even if it's clouded in their anger or their judgment or their resentment, there's usually something true that they're saying, and there's something I can learn from. So I'm yet to hear one criticism that doesn't have a grain of truth in it.
That sounds like a healthy approach, to especially to being a person that's so much in the public eye in many ways, to walk that out, because I can see where not taking that type of a posture could lead to some destructive roads for people as well too.
Well, sometimes you can take too much. Like sometimes the critics' resentments are personal, and instead of just taking the truth, you try and alter yourself to what they tell you to be. And that's equally destructive as just blocking the whole thing out. So it's a very delicate balance where you want to be open to what's true, but you need to be protective for what is otherwise sort of an ego attack.
And so to take a little bit of a right turn, or maybe it's a left turn, I don't know. You have 2 kids, is that correct?
Yeah, I have a daughter and a stepdaughter.
Yes, daughter. And so how has being a father really changed you as a person and an artist?
It's asked me to be more patient. It's asked me to be both less selfish and more selfish, in that it's asked me to give up things that are just for my personal comfort, but to fight for things that are part of my personal destiny. And both of those have been challenging. it's asked me to love and to support, and yeah, I mean, it's an incredible process. It's a difficult process, but it's an incredible one.
Mm. So do you have any tours or shows in the near future, or, and how are you kind of taking all these concepts that you're cultivating to on the road with you?
Well, I've made a new album that's going to come out early next year called Love is the Great Rebellion. And it deals with a lot of these concepts, but the songs are a bit more accessible. They're pop songs, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope the opportunity comes to share those in more mainstream avenues. Like, there are some projects that don't suit that,
mm-hmm.
and some that do, and I think this one might be one that has a chance to connect with people in a broader way than, say, the Ayahuasca project.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to be really open to that. I've signed to a major label, and I'm hoping that those things provide some avenues for the music to get out there, and I'd like to stand behind that. But in general, I'm not sort of calculating
mm-hmm.
with my career. I make things that I'm excited about,
mm-hmm.
and I try and stand behind them and share them generously, but I don't have too many expectations at this point. 20 years into my career, so many things have surprised me, both the successes and the failures, that I kind of assume I have no idea what's going to happen with the project.
But and talking about this new album, I know you've said before that, like, you see each album as something that has a theme or a storyline. What would you say the theme or storyline for Love is the Greatest Rebellion?
Well, it's kind of about will, and not the will of the ego, but the will of the warrior inside us that is loving and that advances and never stops advancing. And it requires a tremendous amount of rebelliousness to do spiritual work,
mm-hmm.
in that we have to continually fight to let go of the past
mm-hmm.
and what was true yesterday, and open ourselves up to the new truth that
mm-hmm.
exists in this moment. So it's really about that rebelliousness, the rebelliousness of letting go of the old.
And what kind of music are you listening to these days?
I've really been enjoying listening to Wagner's operas,
mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to think what else. I don't know, different things. I'm going to go see Peter Cater and Carlos Mackay do their new concert for their new album together, and my stepdaughter has been getting into 90s indie rock, so playing. She's been listening to Bikini Kill and what else, Zooey Deschanel, and
uh-huh.
so yeah, just in our house as a whole, and then of course lots of the Wiggles and Taylor Swift for my 5-year-old.
Oh gosh, I've got kids too. Do you actually, as a father, do you try to help nudge them or cultivate their musical tastes in certain directions or avenues?
Only in the sense that I don't like them to listen to things with swear words or
mm-hmm.
overtly sexual concepts that might confuse them at
mm-hmm.
this age. I mean, for my stepdaughter, it's a little late now. She's now on the computer and sourcing out her own stuff. But
mm-hmm.
if we're going to listen in the car, I mean, it's interesting because I'm not like a puritanical person,
mm-hmm.
but I do believe that there are things that are obstacles,
mm-hmm.
and I think cursing is an obstacle. I think
mm-hmm.
it devalues language and then devalues the mind that revels in it and enjoys it.
mm-hmm.
So I try to some extent to just protect the kids from things that I see as there might be obstacles for them.
Hmm. And so I always like to end an interview with a deep question and a ridiculous one.
Not like all these other superficial conversations.
Yes. Oh, it's been total nothing so far. So feel free to answer these however you want. And so for the deep one, we'll just say what is like the most essential question that you're wrestling with these days?
The most essential question is, how can I keep doing without doing? How can I keep moving forward without tension?
Mm-hmm.
How can I keep my intensity without tension?
Mm-hmm. And how do you do that?
That's why it's a question. If you had an answer, it wouldn't be a question for me.
That's true. So now the ridiculous one is: do you ever wake up late at night in like a cold sweat, worrying that somehow John Cusack will be outside your place with a boombox over his head playing Peter Gabriel? Is that a fear of yours?
No, that hasn't happened yet. I mean, we have, we all deal with jealousy every now and then, but that's not one of the fantasies that particularly troubles me.
Okay, good. I'm glad. So Ben, thank you so much for being on the show, and I really look forward to new music that's on the horizon, and I've enjoyed really just the breadth of your career, and I've got it, in my iTunes, and I listen to it quite often. So I really just appreciate you for your time and your graciousness to be on the show with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. Be well.
All right. Thanks so much.
Well, thanks so much for listening to us this last hour. Thanks for journeying with us through Ben Lee and Andrew Belle. Just a reminder that you can catch this broadcast on podcast at www.snarkyfaith.com. But that is all I have this hour. I will catch you again next week with new stuff, the new and greatest. But that's it, and we're out of here.
WCOM is listener-supported community radio, and Snarky Faith is only possible through our sponsors. Aqueduct Conference Centre was established in 1978 as a peaceful destination for small group meetings, special events, conferences, retreats, and weddings. For more information, go to www.aqueductcc.com. We are also sponsored by Lumen. Lumen, a spiritual community of seekers, sojourners, question askers, doubters, and skeptics, is a collective of fellow travelers that embrace the truth that all life is sacred, hope is real, and tomorrow can be better than today. All are welcome. You can find more information at www.lumencommunities.com.